Welcome to Business Leaders Coach, where we educate, equip, enable, and empower you to become the best version of yourself as a leader. My name is Toyosi Mbi, founder of Business Leaders Coach, and in this episode, I want to share with you 5 steps to becoming a learning leader. Well, first of all, Happy New Year, and hopefully it's not too late to wish you a Happy New Year. I hope the year has started just as you wanted. I'm looking forward to an exciting 2022, and I hope that on this podcast we can equip you with ways to help you grow as a leader, focusing on business leaders who want to grow their business to the next level, entrepreneurs who want to take their business out, and also even managers that want to build their team. I'm speaking to you, and I want to really support you on that journey this year. Today, I want to share with you 5 steps to becoming a learning leader. And I'm going to start off with a quote. It might be a bit long, but I want you to listen to the words as I read. And it reads, "The simple truth is that we are entering into a strange new world in which rapid change will be the only stable characteristic. And this simple truth has several radical implications for education and learning. The why of self-directed learning is survival, your own survival as an individual, and also the survival of the human race. Clearly, we're not talking here about something that would be nice or desirable. Neither are we talking about some new educational fad. We are talking about a basic human competence, the ability to learn on one's own. That has suddenly become a prerequisite for living in this new world." Now, as you hear this quote, you might think that this is something that was said in response to our current climate. Well, this is a quote from Malcolm Knowles, who was an American adult educator, and this was written in his forward-thinking book, Self-Directed Learning, which was written in 1975. Yes, 1975. That's 47 years ago at the time of this recording. So one of the most important things that you notice that he observed was how we defined education. And he said that, we can no longer define education as transmitting what is known, but rather the purpose of education must be to develop the skills of inquiry and curiosity. And so when you think about the impact that this pandemic is having, it is accelerating these realities. And so leaders must become learners. Now, I don't think that that's a new thing, right? What I do find is that although we talk a lot about leaders becoming learners or even self-directed learners, but what I find is that we don't have a framework around how to learn. And so in this episode, I want to give you 5 steps to becoming a learning leader. And as Malcolm mentioned there, this is survival. This is no longer just talk. This is how we are going to survive this new economy. He wrote this almost 50 years ago. And when I read it, first of all, I thought, I can't believe why it sounds like he was speaking today, but he was speaking today. He was speaking about the future, and that future has arrived. So I really want you to pay attention today to this episode, or whenever you're watching this or listening to this. Doesn't matter. Whenever you're listening to this, you need to pay attention, listen to this all through to the end, because what I'm going to share with you are the tools that you need. So why do I think this is important? Well, if you are leading your own organization or you're leading a team, you play a key role with influencing your team members and staff to also become learners. And in fact, if you listen to my last episode, A New Leader's Perspective, episode 32, then you'll find that my conviction is that you should be encouraging every member in your team and organization to become a leader. In the winter of 2019, Harvard Business Review, they produced a special issue totally dedicated to learning, and it was titled How to Learn Faster and Better. One of the articles in this issue was an article titled, Is Yours a Learning Organization? This was written by David Garvin, Amy Edmondson, and Francesca Gino. And they had come together to put together something that they called the 3 building blocks that an organization can use to see if they are a learning organization. And the building blocks that they came up with was, number 1, having a supportive learning environment. Number 2, concrete learning processes and practices. And number 3, leadership that reinforces learning. And one of the quotes in this article was, and I quote, organizational learning is strongly influenced by the behaviors of leaders. When leaders actively question and listen to employees and thereby prompt dialogue and debate, people in the institution feel encouraged to learn. And basically, the overall summary of that entire issue was that CEOs or leaders of businesses must realize that to be successful in the world today, you need to be building a learning organization. A learning organization. But what's the issue? What is the obstacle? I think the challenge we all face is that we don't have a clear method of learning. We maybe read more books and learn more information. And there are times when the things do stick. But learning that is going to be going into or that will lead to transformation involves more than this. So before I go into the steps, it's vital that we understand that the mindset of the learner is even more important than the steps. And so I want to go through the mindset. The first and most important mindset is that you are going to need to choose to become a self-directed learner. And what this means is that you are taking ownership of your learning. You are looking for ways to learn. You are intentional about your learning, and you know that you and only you are responsible for your learning. So you're not waiting to be prompted. You're not waiting to sign up for a course. You're not waiting for your organization to find an MBA program for you. Yes, all those things are good, but you got to take this to be your own responsibility. The self-directed learner mindset. That's important. That's number 1. I am going to be a lifelong learner. The second mindset is that you need to have a growth mindset rather than a fixed mindset. Carol Dweck's research is a fundamental perspective. If you haven't heard of Carol Dweck, I'll definitely encourage you to read her book, Mindset. Type her name, Carol Dweck, into YouTube, watch a video, just understand. Perhaps you've heard of the 2 fundamental mindsets that we have towards growing and learning, which is that we either have a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. And it's essential to carry that perspective of a growth mindset. The learning leader needs to have that because obviously it's going to keep you persevering as you make incremental shifts towards the direction that you want to go. The third mindset is what I am calling having a learning mindset or learner mindset. This is, in my definition, it's having the humility to unlearn what is no longer working in order to give room for new ideas and perspectives around things that are working. In fact, this is going to be one of the biggest challenges that many of us that have grown up into this new economy, our biggest challenge is unlearning. I'll give you a quick example. 2 years ago, I was doing a workshop, and it was just an idea of getting these participants to think about how they can use TikTok in their business. You should have seen the way they responded initially. It was like, why are we doing this? Why are we going down this route? TikTok is not for business. Well, look at what's happening now. I don't use TikTok, but this is the problem, isn't it? Am I going to be quick enough to unlearn in order to be able to look with fresh eyes about how can this work? Okay. So as we continue on this journey, we can see that we have had to shift our thinking in the area, for instance, of working from home. I recall being with my colleagues discussing in January 2020, before the pandemic struck, how we need to train our managers to be more flexible around the working from home policy. And at that time, the thinking was that this was impossible. This was going to be impossible to shift the mindset of our managers. But by March the same year, there was no option. Everybody worked from home. And funny enough, over the months subsequently, the business did even better. So with these mindsets in place, let's now go through the 5 steps. So if you want to be this learning leader, then you're going to need to have answers to these questions. You see, because what I've done is I've turned each step into a question, and some of them have sub questions, right? And just to let you know that I've spoken to many people, and many people don't have clear answers to these questions. Okay, so I want you to take some time to really reflect on these questions. One of the things that I want these podcasts to do, I want these podcasts to challenge your thinking. I don't just want to pass on information. I want you to get thinking. So if you are listening to this, maybe you're running or you're driving, maybe you have to come back to this, get a journal, get a notepad, and force yourself to have answers to these questions. They're going to help you so much, more than what you can imagine, right? So the steps are questions. They're not just points, okay? And in some situations, you perhaps need to ask yourself why you've given that first answer, because typically the first answer we come up with is maybe just the surface. And so you're going to need to go through a process called the 6 or 7 whys, and where you ask yourself, why have I given that answer? And then try and find the reason and keep on going till you get down to the real root around that answer. It will help you go a long way. So let's go through the 5 steps of how you can become a learning leader. Step 1, the question is, who do you want to be? Or you can make it personal and write down, who do I want to be? So this is the question that helps you get clear on your identity. See, a lot of times we ask what we want, and this is usually what's called an outcome goal kind of question. I want a wife, I want a husband, I want children, I want to run a successful business, I want to earn X amount, I want to travel to all these places. All of these are outcome goals. However, who do you want to be, right? This is getting you to think about your identity. Think about how you answer that question. Who do you want to be? Now, you might want to say, who do you want to be in the next 10 years? Who do you want to be in the next 15 years? Who do you want to be in the next 20 years, to give it some space, to make it more visionary? But it's still pushing you to think about more around your identity. I want to be a great leader, for instance, might be your answer. I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to be a loving father. I want to be a loving mother. I want to be a great wife. I want to be a great husband. See, these are identity questions, answers to these questions. This question is asking, who is your best self? This is the reason why you hear me say that Business Leaders Coach wants to help you become the best version of yourself, the best self. The biggest challenge is that many of us have not put enough thought into declaring who that is and what that actually looks like. And so you need to take time to think about the answer to that. Now, one of the things to be careful about is not to answer this question with a narrow job title. So be careful by answering. Some of you might want to answer the question, I want to be the next director, or I want to be, you might put a job title, a title in there. Be careful of defining yourself by a title. And I've coached a number of people and I've asked this question, and this was in a bigger organization. And a lot of times people would go for the next promotional target. I want to be the director, And the problem with that is when that title gets taken away or when they make you redundant, do you then cease to be? And that's why sometimes job titles do impact people's identity if they've defined themselves through that title. It is slightly different if you define yourself as an entrepreneur. You can see that whether things go high or low, being an entrepreneur, being resourceful, so you are actually putting on a different perspective of who you are in those circumstances. So be very careful with your answer to that question and make it more around the character qualities of the person you want to be rather than the title in itself. In his book, Atomic Habits, James Clear gives good and sound reasons why it is important to set these type of goals first before you then establish process goals which help you get the outcome goals. So step number 1 is the question, who do I want to be? How do you answer that question? Step number 2, who am I now? So once you have an idea of the person you want to be, that's the best version of yourself, then we can now ask, who are you now? When you're lost in the supermarket, in the shopping mall, you want to look at the map and you want to find out where you are, right? That's what we're doing right now. So the way to move this forward, it's best to divide this question into at least 2 parts. The first part is another question, which is, what are my strengths? So there are most likely areas that you are doing well. There are things that you perhaps do naturally. There are things where people will say, how do you do that? You do it so easily. What are those things? What are the things that you do that others will say, how come you do that so easily? These are your strengths. You could also take Strengths Finders survey from Gallup to know how to articulate your strengths, because sometimes we do find it hard to narrow down what those strengths are. I've done the test. For instance, mine, not a surprise, came up as learner, futuristic, maximizer, believer, and connectedness were the top 5 that came up for me. And you want to just be able to know that I've got that on my wall. Sometimes I just look at that, and these are the areas that when I'm doing these type of things that are aligned with my strength, they give me energy. So it's important that you start off with your strengths because you want to build on that. The second area then is, what are my gaps? So this second category is to ask around the gap between the person that you want to be and where you are right now. See, that's the gap. And it's important for you to be more specific. What are the areas in your character, for instance, that you still need to work on? Areas in your competencies that you need to work on, and you can write them down. Now, in addition to these 2 areas, understanding your personality profile would also help you know if you are, for instance, naturally systematic in your thinking. There's a strength to that. There's also, there's challenges to that when it comes to working with maybe different types of people. Or if you're creative, for instance, you would know that that's an area that you are strong in. being decisive or being empathetic. This insight will give you more clarity on your starting point. Okay, so that's step number 2. And the question is, who am I now? Step number 3, what is my learning plan? So once you have been able to articulate your strengths and the gap, you can now create a learning plan. And the learning plan should help you answer the question, how can I build on my strengths? So first, it's important that you intentionally use more of your strengths. So for instance, you might find that you're doing more things that are draining you, and that's because you don't have time to use what you're really good at, the strengths that you have. Now, there are some times where we might love to do things that are of minimal impact. So you have to use your discretion, but it's important that you find ways to build on your strengths. And then second, how can I reduce my gaps? So you need to ask the question, how can I reduce my gaps? And this could simply be something that you need to stop doing and get someone else to do it, or it could be that you start learning how to do it better, whatever that thing is, that area. So one of the outcomes in this step is to set learning goals and then creating learning plans that will support that. See, these will be specific situations that you are intentionally going to be able to know that you are learning. So for instance, learning plans that lay out concrete, practical steps yield the most powerful improvement. And so as an example, people who work on improving their ability as speakers, what they would do as an example is that they might set goals like the following. For instance, number 1 might be give at least 2 formal presentations every month and have them critiqued either by myself based on my scoring system that I've given to myself, or maybe with a peer, or that kind of thing. A second one might be, for instance, to always practice with a friend or a coach before giving the presentation live. These are specific plans that you have in place so that you know that you're intentionally working on this area, right? So these type of plans make the learning more concrete. So you need to have a learning plan. Now, step 4, what behaviors do I practice? So at the end of the day, right, everything that you learn shows up in your behavior. And if it is the right behavior, you want to turn it into a habit so that it's subconscious, so that you're simply doing it without overthinking. Now, after training thousands of people and seeing people get to step 3, it's not a surprise, learning and development departments, HR departments will say, have a learning plan, and people have a learning plan, but then after that, nothing really happens. And so I developed something out of a lot of my own research, and I came up with my 5 daily habits process. So how do we embed this into our day-to-day activities? How do we embed this new area that we want to learn into our day-to-day activities? So listen up, and I'm going to give you an example of how this can work. So let's use a very common challenge that many leaders face. One of them would be empowering others. Many leaders express their desire to have their direct reports take on more responsibilities. However, at the same time, the process is challenging and some have been burnt. The number of people that express their frustration, right? And they've tried it and they've made mistakes. So how do you learn to do this properly? Well, first, you need to have a plan, as in step 3, okay? But the most important part is your learning on this. And so you need to have the right mindset. So first of all, if we are talking about empowering others, your thoughts or your core belief that empowering others is the right way forward is essential, because you're going to then push through to learn this. This is where having a growth mindset comes in. You're not going to do it a few times and then give up. You're going to figure out how to make it work. That's why the growth mindset is important. The learning mindset is also important because perhaps the way you were doing it wasn't working. And so the learning mindset, as I said, is about unlearning in order to then learn the new way. Then you're going to need to now have the proper process to empower this person. And doing this means having a process that informs you if this is the right person to delegate this task to. And so you might come up with a criteria, a framework, maybe a situational leadership framework where you're saying, is this person competent as well as committed? And you have an idea of where they are. Now, a specific behavior for you then is the end point of this. And I define behavior simply as whatever we hear people say or what we see them do. So that's how we define behavior, is hearing people by what they say, that we can say this is what they said, that's their behavior, or we can also say this is what we saw them actually do. So when it comes to hearing them say, questions is one of them. So the specific behavior might be, for instance, to always ask, what decisions related to this assignment are you comfortable making? That might be a question that you might always be asking your direct report. Another question, for instance, might be, what support do you need from me? Or another one might be, when should we next check in? Those are 3 questions I've just given to you. You can have that as part of your behavior that you want to demonstrate. So this will be how you can specifically say that you are learning how to empower. Therefore, the daily habit would be to, number 1, think, which is to reinforce the thinking behind why it is important to learn this competency of empowering others. Number 2, plan. You plan when and what you're going to say, what you're going to do with this person. You're planning it. And then number 3 is do, which is to execute on your plan, right? And then number 4, now this is the most important part here, is reflect, which is that after the event has taken place, or at the end of the day, or maybe it's the next morning, you ask yourself some questions on what went well and what could have been done better. And you take note on that. And then number 5, you learn. You ask yourself the simple question, what did I learn and what will I do different next time? You see, if you did this every single day, being that pinpointed, you are learning every single day. So this is how you can turn your learning into a daily experience. Now, I have created a template on the 5 daily habits, and you can go to businessleaderscoach.com/5DH to download the template, or you can see the link in the show notes. I'll be more than happy to help you with that. And it's simply just asking those type of questions on a daily basis. Step 5 then is, who can support me and hold me accountable? You know, some of the best sports people have coaches and a team that supports them. In today's world, the learning leader needs a support team and people that can hold him or her accountable. This has been proved to help the person stay focused and achieve their growth and development goals, which produces confidence. So the question then is, who should be your support and accountability team? The best people to hold you accountable are the people around you, your team, the people that see you day in, day out. You can let them know that this is something that you are working on, and you can share with them the specific behaviors that you want them to observe and encourage them to let you know when you do it and when you don't demonstrate this. You know, you can tell your direct reports that you're trying to work on empowering them, and these are the questions I want to be asking, and when I don't do that, just give me the feedback, and when I do, let me know as well. This is going to go a long way on your growth, but let me tell you what, you're also demonstrating that you are a learner to your team members as well. Now, in addition to this, you can also hire a coach. You can get a mentor. You can get friends to give you feedback. You can get peers to also do that. Anybody that can give you good feedback will be helpful in this process and will help you to develop as a learning leader. So there you have it. 5 steps to becoming a learning leader. Step 1, who do I want to be? Step 2, who am I now? Step 3, what is my learning plan? And step 4, what behaviors do I need to practice? Step 5, who can support me and hold me accountable? So I hope this has helped you. So I've got a question for you. In what area did you have to teach yourself to learn, and how did you go about doing that? You can share that with me. Email me, toya@businessleaderscoach.com, or on any of the social media platforms. Just put a comment. I would love to engage with you on that. And what area do you think you need to focus on in the 5 steps as well? Connect with me on my website, businessleaderscoach.com. Subscribe to the podcast. Connect with me on LinkedIn, Instagram, or Facebook. For now, this is Toya Osunbi for Business Leaders Coach. Speak to you soon, and thank you.